The one indisputably good thing about making a Pixar video is that you don't have to look for any clips because no matter how short you cut them down, no matter how you edit it, Pixar will just copyright strike you anyway. Soul is currently my movie of the year of 2020. However, that's not much of an accomplishment considering a lot of the year's best haven't been released yet. With that being said, it is most probably going to be the best movie released in 2020 that I saw in 2020, unless someone magically brainwashes me to like Wonder Woman 1984. When Soul was first announced, a lot of people were concerned with the potential visual and thematic reliance on the likes of 2015's Inside Out, and the concern was totally legitimate. You could see from just that short little plot summary all those years back that Pixar could possibly be treading on old ground, but I'm very happy to say that Soul does enough differently on both of those fronts to carve out its own identity. Sure, I could see how people could say it's a nice partner film to Inside Out, but I wouldn't even go as far as to say it's a spiritual successor. From an animated standpoint, Soul looks great from beginning to end. I think both The Real World and The Great Before have great art styles, and while a lot of people would say that The Great Before's art style is too simplistic, I think it was quite charming and got the job absolutely done. Soul does a big favor for its two worlds by keeping the quality of the film relatively consistent. You're never aching for one world over the other, and because of that, it avoids Inside Out's biggest mistake of having a huge differential between the enjoyment of one half of the film and the other. The middle of this film could have absolutely capsized the entire experience. The tired body switching trope used in the middle of this film is enough to make you roll your eyes by itself, and it gives way to a series of awkward interactions commonly associated with the cliche. But overall, Pixar limits itself. It makes the interactions in the barbershop, at Joe's mom's shop, at Joe's apartment, about the lessons of the film, about dreams and passions in life, and because of that, it always feels thematically focused. Not to mention, what also helps this section of the story, which represents the bulk of the film, is that the writer still have the majority of the dialogue between Joe and 22 exclusively. 22 is an endearing character in her own right, who works really well as a comic relief, but Joe Gardner, is easily the biggest triumph of this film and one of the best Pixar protagonists that they've ever created. It's more than just his relatability, his intense drive, and his appreciation for both life and, more specifically, his passion makes him work so damn well as a character. You're so invested in his outcome that it keeps your interest in the film high and the momentum of the film itself very speedy because of the fact that you were just constantly rooting for this guy to ultimately achieve his goal. And that's not to take anything away from 22's characterization either, because it is similarly really smart. Even though her antics at the beginning of the film may be the film's highlight, the most entertaining part, I cannot say that they are done in excess, which really helps the film, because if they were, you could have been dying for that the entire time. But because she is imbued with a sense of melancholy, even from the moment we meet her, we understand that Soul is not positioning itself as a comedy, and you're never desiring it to be one. You always respect its message and its intentions throughout. And Pixar, you have to respect them from showing a considerable amount of restraint. While they could have plugged a bunch of unnecessary jokes throughout, they ultimately keep it to character, and every single aspect of the supporting cast is never regulated to just a joke. They each serve a purpose, and it's another reason why the work just works so damn well. I've been doing these reviews for enough time now where I can kind of recall certain flaws I had with other films and kind of incorporate them and make ties here. And when you look at something like John Wick 3, the characters, the supporting cast are exclusively used for movement, for progression of the plot. And because of that, they feel very unnatural and kind of like an invasion of the integrity of the plot itself. Here, the integrity is kept because of the fact the characters are used to tell you something new about the lessons of the story. Because they keep on unfolding the actual theme of the narrative, they never feel like they're an intrusion on what the film is trying to say. And even when they are just used to get the plot moving along, something like Terry, the voice work is so excellent and the comedic moments are so perfectly executed that you don't even mind. I'd be lying if I said that I couldn't see these moments becoming arbitrary in the future, but on first watch, I can't help but say that Pixar handled these moments for about as expertly as they could have with the intended effect of the climax. It would be impossible to feel the intense gratification of Joe's success without these moments, but I also must admit that the success itself, in part, doesn't feel wholly satisfying. And my dissatisfaction is so odd because mathematically, a lot of what Pixar does at the end is absolutely the right story decisions. Instead of having this moment, which is so common in stories, it was just in Claws, which I watched a couple weeks ago, where the character does something wrong and you know that they're going to get found out and you know that everyone's going to look at them and they're going to realize, like, oh yeah, I did something selfish, I got to go back. Joe contemplates and discovers that for himself. He doesn't have a moment where anyone else tells him what he did was wrong. He doesn't have a moment where he always knows that he was wrong and then suddenly discovers it. He contemplates what he could have done right and makes that decision instead. And I think that distinction is very important to make because it makes for a very simplistic, childish plot versus a very sophisticated one. And they also made the intelligent decision to let Joe live because of how deeply we desired him to live and how deeply he changed. It was very earned, but even then, Pixar makes a lot of small flaws here that add up to an ending that I can't say I'm fully in love with. The musical elements of this film are totally abridged in the final jazz performance. It's not a moment of catharsis that built up the great score that's been going on the entire time, and the, of course, dedication to music itself, and it's neither a subversion. It's just a murky in-between that is a confusing and horrible decision on part of the filmmakers to finally close out the musical elements of this film. The moral blame, while I believe as though is handled better than it could have been. It could have been absolutely botched. I think Joe's revelation is important. I think it mostly works. The fact is, you have me so intensely in this guy's corner, and then you abdicate all blame from 22 that I can't help but feel that the guy is getting a little shortchanged. I do believe there should have been more of an equal spread in terms of the blameworthiness of the characters. I also feel as though that the montage for which Joe realizes that he is not fully satisfied with his decisions, while I believe as though it is the most visually impactful part of the film, and while I also feel as though it proved the point of the film, the fact is I saw it in March with Onward, and it totally ruined this moment. It was the same exact thing where you look back and realize all these important moments in life, and it brought the character to another realization, and it did not work because I just saw it less than a year ago by the same company. Then when you have the final moment where they say goodbye, you have 22's journey to Earth, you also just have, as I said beforehand, a serious hindrance due to the lack of the big screen. It could have been an excellent moment in terms of the sound quality and visual quality, but it just is kept short because of the fact that I saw it on television. And then finally, you have when Joe survives, I'm going to be honest, a lot of the third act was ruined by the fact that I was so concerned with Joe living and making the right decision that I couldn't appreciate all of it, but also you have just one image of him walking out, and then the film wraps up where I would have liked more of an expansion and more of a cathartic moment where Joe gets to fully experience life in his body once more. But at the very same time, there was no point during that finale or even after the film where I felt totally robbed of an experience because of that, or I felt as though that the film ultimately ended up betraying itself and going in a totally wrong direction. There are still great moments at the end of the film, and I feel as though that the criticisms inside 22's head really work at the end and aren't used in an unsuccessful way. I believe as though that they have great moments where you have the most important figures of history telling her that she's going to be a nobody, and to have that and to have Joe telling her that she's going to amount to nothing, I think really proves her own sadness and made me swallow the pill of her having no moral blame a lot better. It's overall a balanced ending in terms of it's 50-50 of good and bad, maybe more towards good, but it ultimately does not go as far as it could have. It has numerous flaws, but it also has a lot of stuff going for it at the same time. I would be ignorant of this film's quality if I squarely compared it to the likes of Toy Story 2 or Finding Nemo or Monsters, Inc. and suddenly found it totally irredeemable. It's a great film overall. I'd probably rate it around an 8.4 out of 10, around that range, maybe a little lower, but definitely in the 8 to 8.4. I believe as though that it is without doubt the best film I saw this year. It is at least a film that I found myself consistently interested throughout, and I once again must attribute that to the excellent voice work and writing that took place with Pixar, with Jamie Foxx, and the writers of this film. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the film of the year of 2020. Congratulations to Soul, I guess.